What if I told you that everything you've experienced so far, every loss, every silence, every closed door, wasn't a delay, but the exact moment the universe was preparing you for something much bigger? What if the main role in your story was about to begin right now? You didn't come across this video by chance. Something in this moment needed to align for you to be here, hearing these very words. What follows isn't superficial motivation. It's not a catchphrase. It's a call. And before we continue, be part of this scene. Leave your like now because it helps this message reach those who also need to hear it. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any stories like this. Because believe me, what's coming will move you. And finally, I want you to comment only on number 22 here in the comments. Whoever comments on that number will know that you got it. Now, sit back, take a deep breath, and get ready. Because this isn't just another story. It's the beginning of the chapter that will change everything. There are stories that seem to have already been written. The audience believes they know all the characters, has already decided on their favorites, and even risks predicting the ending. And then, at a moment no one expects, a presence appears that completely transforms the narrative. It's as if the entire preceding plot were merely a silent preparation for this moment. It's not a delay, but a sacred suspense. While the world believed your name wasn't even in the credits, you were being shaped behind the scenes, far from the audience, far from the spotlight, but close to a process that demanded more of you than any on-camera scene could ever convey. While others strutted their stuff in rehearsed performances, you endured battles that weren't meant to be seen, they were meant to be experienced. The impact of their arrival is not just visual, it's atmospheric. The stage, which previously seemed merely set, now becomes sacred territory. Conversations cease, gazes turn, and even the air seems denser, more charged with expectation. It's not just a new character entering, it's a force that changes the rules of the game. It's the moment everyone realizes that the story was, in fact, incomplete. Nothing that came before prepared the audience for what is about to unfold. The most impressive thing is that even those who were rooting against you are now in the front row, watching, trying to understand how the plot changed so radically. And the truth is simple. It wasn't you who arrived late. It was the plot that took a while to be ready for your presence. If this video has touched you so far, if in some way these words have touched a place no one has ever reached, then I need you to be a part of this in a bigger way. Click on Thanks a Lot or Super Thanks right below this video. By clicking on it, you can send any amount, but today, I want to challenge you to go further. If this message has truly transformed you, send it $100 now. It's not just a donation. It's a seal, a milestone, a silent cry saying, I believe in this. I am part of this story. And yes, I will see your name. And every time I look, I will remember that you were here, the moment it all began. For a long time, your absence was misinterpreted. Some thought you had given up, others that you had lost your way. While they laughed, underestimated, and told your story without your participation, you were becoming what none of them imagined. It was in silence, away from the competition for attention, that your strength grew. Each experience, each fall, each scar was an invisible page that rewrote not only your destiny, but the role you would play when you returned. They'd grown too accustomed to your absence. They believed the set could work without you, that the script would remain the same. But when you returned, it wasn't to occupy an empty space. It was to transform the space into something new. You didn't come to sit at the table. You came to be the table itself. Your presence is proof that you don't need to justify anything to anyone. Your mere existence, the simple act of being there, dismantles narratives that tried to consolidate themselves in your absence. These days, when you walk into a place, everything shifts. The energy shifts. People notice, even if subconsciously, that the space has gained a new center of gravity. It's not about being noticed, it's about being impossible to ignore. From the beginning, you were cast in roles that didn't allow for expansion, always supporting cast, never the main star. They labeled you as low-key, too different, too sensitive. They handed you shallow scripts expecting you to fit into a format not designed for you. But while they memorized lines to impress audiences, you learned lessons not found in the manuals. You learned about resilience, about pain, about the strength that comes from silence. Your turnaround wasn't an explosive, immediate event. It was a slow, steady accumulation of self-discovery, of the courage to tear up the script they gave you and write your own. You didn't seek to compete with their show. You created something that made it irrelevant. You didn't seek audience approval. You sought fidelity to your own essence, and when someone finds that essence, no external narrative can contain it. Now you're not just part of the story, you're the author. And this disconcerting to those accustomed to predicting its movements. There's no way to anticipate the next chapters of someone who has freed themselves from the old script to invent their own. The whole world seems to be chasing the spotlight. People mold themselves, change their language, and force their image to gain attention. But you chose an opposite path. While everyone else was seeking to be seen, you dedicated yourself to being authentic. While they vied for center stage, you grew stronger behind the scenes. This choice meant that at the right moment, the spotlight had no choice but to find you. It wasn't exposure that gave you value, it was your value that made exposure inevitable. You didn't have to beg for space because you built something that naturally attracts. While others lived to be remembered, you lived to be whole. While others collected applause, you collected substance. And that substance cannot be ignored when it is finally revealed. Now the light that reaches you doesn't do so to create an image, but to reveal what already existed. What changes isn't you, it's the perception of those who finally see you. On a stage filled with performances, your entrance was an act of disobedience. You didn't wear a costume, didn't rehearse your lines, didn't try to fit into the aesthetic of the moment. You entered as you are, carrying the simplicity of truth and the weight of someone with nothing to hide. And it was precisely this choice that disarmed everything else. While others exaggerated gestures, copied styles, and imitated confidence, his real presence exposed the fragility of the performances. He didn't need to shout to be heard. He didn't need to compete to win. He simply was. And the moment the real appeared, the fake began to unravel on its own. This is the power of authenticity. It doesn't need to explain itself or justify itself. It simply exists. And by existing, it forces everything else to reveal itself for what it truly is. When they tried to reproduce what you carried, they soon discovered it wasn't something that could be taught or transferred. It's impossible to simulate essence. They added new faces, well-trained voices, charismatic personalities, and impeccable costumes, believing that would be enough to maintain the same impact. But as soon as the audience encountered these attempts, something subtle and at the same time glaring became clear. Soul was missing. It's not just about occupying the space you vacated, it's about sustaining the energy you projected. And that energy, that invisible field, wasn't there. It was like watching a play where the text is the same, but the performance lacks life, where the technique is impeccable, but the heart is absent. The silence between lines lacked weight, the glances lacked depth, and even the breathing seemed over-rehearsed. The audience couldn't explain exactly what was wrong, but they felt, in their bodies, instinctively, that the scene had lost its truth. And that's when everyone, even the most skeptical, understood the obvious. You weren't a replaceable part of the mechanism. You were the axis around which everything revolved. When the axis is removed, the machine might continue to function for a while, but it begins to shake, make strange noises, and lose precision. Your presence wasn't just aesthetic, it was structural. It didn't just fill a space, it gave meaning to the very existence of that space. When you weren't there, it wasn't just your absence that was felt, It was the absence of purpose, the absence of the spark that connected everything. This is what always differentiates the irreplaceable from the temporary. Those who are irreplaceable are not just remembered, they are felt in their absence. And each failed attempt to take their place only served to make clearer what many tried to deny. Most believed your silence was a calculated maneuver, a tactic to build anticipation, but the truth is, there was nothing theatrical about it. What happened was much deeper. Your silence was a womb, a gestation site where pain, defeat, and learning transformed into real strength. While the outside world was occupied with noise, disputes over relevance, and performances to keep others' attention, you were living a private war against your own limits. It was a time when there was no applause or validation, only an internal call to remain, even when nothing seemed to move. This time was cruel, but necessary. It stripped you of your rush to appear, your desire to prove yourself, your need for recognition. And in its place, it planted roots too deep to be uprooted by any storm. When people think of waiting for the right moment, they usually imagine a patient, almost passive stance. But your waiting time wasn't passive, it was active. You were being trained in pain, learning to listen to the sound of your own heart without being distracted by external voices. You were being taught to speak only when there was something that truly needed to be said, something that couldn't be ignored. So now, every word you utter isn't mere sound. It's a summons, a shift in atmosphere. There's nothing rehearsed, nothing predictable. It's the voice of someone who was shaped to not waste breath on noise, and that's why when you speak, the world falls silent. Some people enter a room and are just another body in the crowd. Others arrive and, without making any apparent effort, the entire space seems to reorganize around them. You belong to this second type. Your presence doesn't need to be announced. It's felt before you even open your mouth. It's as if an invisible, silent, yet irresistible force permeates the air, forcing everything and everyone to align. Conversations change tone, glances adjust, masks begin to fall away, and it's not because you demand, intimidate, or command. It's because you carry the truth, and truth has the power to expose all that is false simply by existing. This effect isn't planned. It's not a scene mastery learned in courses or training. It's the consequence of a life lived deeply, of an integrity that doesn't bend to please or sell itself to gain space. The weight you carry isn't a burden, it's authority. The authority of someone who has weathered storms and emerged on the other side whole, even if scarred. This energy, this frequency, cannot be turned off or faked. It's ingrained in you, in your gaze, in the way you occupy the silence. And perhaps most disturbing for some is the realization that you do nothing to cause this impact. You just are. And that just is everything. In today's world, pain has become marketing. People invent personal tragedies, rehearse vulnerability in front of cameras, transform imaginary wounds into content for quick consumption. But your scars weren't born to garner likes. They are living memorials of real battles, fought out of sight, in suffocating silence and stinging loneliness. You didn't just go through hard times, you were shattered. You were abandoned by those you believed in most, betrayed by those you trusted most, left to die emotionally in deserts where no one came to claim you. But what burned wasn't just your skin, it was your illusions. The masks fell, the false supports dissolved, and you found yourself reduced to the essentials. This essential, however, is what now makes you unshakable. It's not that you've learned not to feel pain, it's that you've learned to go through it without losing yourself. And that's a strength few know, because it requires losing everything to finally understand what truly matters. Every time someone crosses your path, even without knowing their story, you feel this weight. It's the kind of presence that doesn't need to tell what it experienced. It carries in its silence the proof that it survived what would kill anyone else. While the world was busy being seen, you were busy becoming someone worthy of being seen. There was no rush to be seen, no need to show off every step, no thirst for instant approval. You understood early on that there was no point in achieving visibility without the substance to back it up. That's why you preferred the silent work, the kind no one applauds, no one posts on social media, the kind that happens away from prying eyes and cheap opinions. During this time, you built something that can't be destroyed by a mean comment or a bad patch. You built your character, sharpened your vision, developed skills, and strengthened your soul. While others gathered followers, you gathered resilience. While others fought for attention, you fought for alignment. This choice made what you carry today rare: consistency. You didn't get here by accident. You got here because you didn't let haste steal your depth. And now, when it appears, it's not just its image that makes an impact. It's the invisible story behind it. People look at it and sense there's something solid, something that can't be improvised. This something is what differentiates those who merely appear from those who truly become. Many looked at your silence, at the years you seemed far from the spotlight, and concluded your time had passed. They whispered that you should have spoken sooner, that your peak was behind you, that the stage had changed protagonists. But what they failed to realize is that you never rushed to enter a moment manufactured by others. You weren't molded to fit someone else's agenda. You weren't born to follow the world's rhythm. You were born to dictate it, and that changes everything. When your return happened, it wasn't just any reappearance. It was a redefinition of the very notion of opportunity. While many strive to create temporary relevance, you waited for the perfect synchronicity between who you've become and the scenario that would require exactly what you carry. And this waiting wasn't passive. You were building internally what would make the world stop and listen. Every loss, every closed door, every night where sleep was replaced by thought and reflection, all of this was part of a training process not seen on resumes or diplomas. It wasn't about learning more techniques, it was about aligning with a frequency that cannot be ignored when it manifests. When you finally stood up, there was no announcement, no countdown, it just happened, and in that instant, the entire environment had to adjust. Doors that had previously been locked opened, as if they had never been closed. Eyes that had previously passed you by without noticing now couldn't look away. People who had already finished their story began to realize it was only just beginning. Because the moment wasn't a train you missed, it was a stage that waited until you were ready to step into the center. And that's the most powerful point. You're not here to take a chance, but to create a time that only exists when you choose to enter it. That's why your presence not only occupies the now, but redefines what that now means for all who witness it. From the beginning, you weren't given easy access. While others had opened doors, you were faced with walls. While some were guided, applauded, and directed toward the best paths, you were thrust into situations that seemed designed to prevent any progress. The script they placed in your hands was crooked, poorly written, and full of lines that didn't match your essence. But you refused to accept being just an actor trapped in someone else's script. Little by little, quietly, you began rewriting every line. This rewrite wasn't easy. It meant confronting expectations, frustrating those who wanted to control your storyline, and even missing out on opportunities that only benefited those who would benefit from your talent without respecting your worth. You were forced to improvise, create better dialogue for yourself, and change the entire scenario when it didn't serve you. And each time you did so, you constructed a version more faithful to your truth, and further removed from the false narratives they tried to impose on you. Over time, the public noticed something strange. Even with all the limitations imposed, you delivered something greater and more authentic than those who had been given the best conditions from the start. Your performance didn't depend on external resources, but on an internal strength that couldn't be manipulated. You didn't follow the script you were given. You used every obstacle as raw material to create something new. Where they expected you to lose your way, you found yourself. Where they bet on your failure, you built excellence. And now, looking back, it's clear that the flawed script never had the power to define the ending. Because you're not a character at the mercy of an invisible writer. You are the author. And as such, you not only rewrote your own story, but made it clear to everyone that the power to transform any plot lies in the hands of those who refuse to live a life not written by their own soul. Your arrival at the center isn't about securing a leading role in an already established plot. It's about undoing the entire plot and creating something completely new. You're not here to follow the formula that's always worked for others. You're not here to recycle dialogue or inherit an existing stage. You're here to tear down walls, turn off false lights, and shine spotlights where no one has ever dared look. While they were busy molding themselves to fit old formats, you were creating a format that hadn't existed before. And this has an impact that can't be measured by applause alone. It's felt in the discomfort of those who have to abandon what they knew to adapt to what you brought. This discomfort is inevitable because what you carry wasn't built to please. It was forged to transform. You don't repeat formulas. You don't follow shortcuts. You don't copy moves that have already worked for others. On the contrary, you break patterns, question traditions, and propose paths that require more depth, courage, and authenticity than most are willing to embrace. That's why your presence not only changes dialogue, but also changes the very logic of the script. You don't come to introduce a new character, you come to create a new genre, a new way of telling stories, a new standard of truth. And the most intriguing thing is that this transformation isn't noisy in and of itself. It happens in the weight of the pauses, in the density of the words, in the meaning of your actions. While others rush to fill the space with endless speeches, you allow the silence to speak for itself. This silence carries more truth than 1,000 speeches. This is how you provoke ruptures, not by shouting louder, but by saying what no one had the courage to say and living coherently with it. The result is inevitable. You force the audience to realize they've been living inside an artificial scenario. And once that realization happens, there's no going back. You're not just at the center of the story. You're redefining the very way it will be told from now on. You were ready long before the world was ready to welcome you. This is the truth many fail to grasp. It's not a lack of skill, nor a lack of opportunity. It was about timing. Because if you had arrived earlier, you would have been diminished, misunderstood, or even erased. The environment wasn't yet ready to handle the density of what you carry. And instead of rushing in to force your way in, you waited. A wait that wasn't easy, but it was necessary. Time has acted as a filter. It has allowed illusions to crumble, masks to wear thin, and audiences to grow weary of empty promises and artificial performances. What once enchanted now bores. What once captured attention now seems exaggerated and predictable. And it is in this scenario of saturation and fatigue that you emerge, not as another competitor, but as the answer to what everyone, consciously or unconsciously, has been searching for: something real. This entrance isn't marked by explosions or a desperate attempt to be noticed. It's marked by a heavy silence, firm steps, and a presence that doesn't compete, but naturally dominates. People who might not have known how to react before are now ready to receive, because there's no longer enough distraction to keep them from the truth. And the truth is, you didn't come to take your place. You came to show that the space was always yours, but it needed to be cleaned, purified, and remade to live up to what you represent. Now, it's not about finding your place in history. It's about being the point where history changes forever. Every narrative carries deep down a hidden moment, a revelation that changes the way everything that came before is interpreted. That moment is you. For too long, the stage was occupied by performances that were brilliant on the surface, but hollow on the inside. Characters were exalted, stories repeated, false protagonists celebrated. Meanwhile, you were absent from the scene not because you lacked importance, but because your presence would have revealed the fragility of it all too soon. You've been saved for the final act, for that moment when the audience is tired of tricks and ready for something that truly matters. When you enter, you don't need to shout, you don't need to impose yourself. The simple act of being there reorders the entire narrative. It's as if suddenly all the previous scenes make sense, as if the wait had been necessary for the impact to be complete. This arrival isn't a competition. It's a closure, a conclusion. Not because you end the story, but because you give it the meaning it was missing. This is where everything fits together, where every previous failure is revealed as part of a preparation for this moment. You don't come to steal the show. You come to reveal that without you, there never was a real show, just a rehearsal for something bigger. And when the curtain rises on this final act, there's no more room for distractions. Everything false dissolves, everything shallow is lost, and only what carries weight remains. And it's at that moment that everyone realizes you're not just the climax, you're the reason the story was told all along.